Well, yes, we have a panel coming up, which we know this past year, it's really, consumers really have much more expectations. They really want that connection, they want that personalization, and they just have higher standards. And that's what this panel is all about. It's really about how important it is right now to not only build these direct relationships, but to also build that, first party data. And that's what we're going to talk about. And let me bring on our panelists and introduce them. We have Karthic Bala. He is the Chief Data Officer at Conde Nast. Corbin de Rubertis, the Senior Vice President of Innovation at Meredith Corporation, and Cory Haik, the Chief Digital Officer at Vice Media Group. Hey guys, it's good to see faces and see everybody.
Hi, Lisa.
Likewise.
Thank you. Good to be here.
How are you? I'm so glad to have you guys here. And is everyone, people in Cory, are you in an office, or is that just a really very full room at home?
It's my modified bedroom. Yes.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. Anyone in an office? Or are we all just sort of still?
I'm back in the acoustic tile. Yeah, I don't have that at home.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the office today. Just I think it's been over a year.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, it's the same here. Just try to make the best of the home situation, but hopefully we're getting out there very soon. Well, I definitely want to start kicking things off. And Cory, I want to start with you in terms of, we know Vice, really you have a strong digital presence, you have mobile, YouTube, linear, and you really have that documentary style that you really are directing to that younger Gen Z audience. So how are you building that audience? How are you really connecting with that younger audience?
Thank you, Lisa. One of my favorite things to talk about, absolutely. So Vice and Vice Media Group, generally speaking, and when I say Vice Media Group, a portfolio of brands, our house of brands, Refinery 29, which was part of an acquisition over a year ago, which we integrated during COVID, and I could talk about that. Vice and all of its brands, News, Munchies, Noisy, all of our sub brands, and then ID Magazine, which is a big UK title, but certainly a big digital audience. Half of its audience is in the US, and in fact, ID in particular is one of our youngest audiences and helped pave the way. But Vice traditionally, I'm sure has sort of built its bones on documentary style in the field, just really strong video chops, traditionally built for 16:9 YouTube or ultimately premium linear television. And Vice and Vice Media Group and our collection of brands, we're a youth media, a collection of youth media brands. And when you think about those audiences and where those audiences are, they're mobile, right? They're experiencing live formats, vertical video, what we call stories format, stories with a capital S, of mixed media, combination of video, text, animation. And so we've really put a lot of effort in building out that capability, particularly during COVID. And it's really, we're seeing tremendous gains. In fact, we've built an internal app called Story Studio. Think of it as I call it like a CMS of the future, where we've given our editors, reporters, producers the capability to use this app to point and shoot and to actually create these in these formats natively and then publish to our platforms, which has really accelerated that. But at the same time, seeing our audiences engage on these platforms, interactions around, likes, shares, just measuring those engagement interactions versus like the sheer just volume and scale, which is another sort of strategy development alongside that. So feeling very bullish about those audiences and seeing our audiences age down with that development and just continuing to build that capability.
Yeah, and with Karthic, the Conde Nast, obviously, you guys reach more than 1 billion users globally. And I know you have said you really had that direct to consumer relationship already, but how do you sort of maintain that, especially as, we are seeing so many changes, and how are we really building on that?
Sure. Obviously, during the COVID times, the engagement has skyrocketed, meaning more than double during this time, as people were stuck indoors and consuming a lot of our content. And our goal is to more personalize the user's experience and give them a better experience. We have, like you said, over 1 billion people that we reach globally. And over time, we've just realized that some of these people are highly influential. They're meaning we are influencing the influencers, if you can call it that, because our content is created in that way. And again, like Cory was talking about Vice Media being a newer brand, Conde is much older. I don't even know the dimensions of the first magazine, which was probably 100 years back that it was printed on. So obviously we have a legacy that we have to maintain, and within that brand voice, how can we give the user the best possible experience and kind of take the engagement that we've had to build it to the next level. So where we can then look at the same consumer, figure out ways of monetizing, not just advertising, consumer marketing, whether it's e-commerce or any of those things. How do we build a more trusted relationship and build on what we have from an audience engagement perspective and the scale that you talked about? A big part of that is identity too. That's another part that we're constantly working towards, to understand our audience, make sure they have experiences where they log in and they have to kind of work in an experience which probably is much more personalized, but certainly much more valuable from a publisher's point of view. And hopefully the value is exchanged with the consumer to give them an experience that they care about. So that's kind of how we've looked at it and focused on it.
Yeah, and Corbin, I mean, like Conde Nast, you guys have been around for a long time. You actually got a shout out from Neil.
Yes, we did. Appreciate that, Neil. Thank you.
You know, you, as you were saying when we spoke earlier, you have digital, video, magazine, broadcast. So you have it all. So you have a lot of things to juggle, to sort of, get your, wrap yourself around. So how do you, with all of that in mind, and as saying you're really a legacy brand, how do you then move forward and build that audience?
So it's an ongoing question, Lisa, and obviously the portfolio approach is one that we've chosen. We've made an announcement that we're kind of spinning off our broadcast assets here at the end of the year, which is sort of simplifying and focusing a little bit. But I think for in the digital space, I think the key challenge ahead is what we do when people look up. So as Karthic and Cory pointed out, record traffic. It's been a in the midst of a global tragedy, sort of a weird side effect that publishers are actually having some of their best quarters ever, in terms of the last two performances here, and it seems to be consistent moving forward. But our big concern is, once people do look up from their devices, they go back into the office, they go back outside, how it is that we maintain the relationship with the consumers. And I think, again, it goes back to maybe some of the stuff that Neil was talking about. Meredith, very utility focused. And so, we have an unlikely ally in this next push, which is our retail partners who have a recurring relationship with their consumers. We're trying to really emulate that and build these, sort of closed loops of engagement with our users, so they come back to us again and again. So they come into experiences that are not just one-off end of a search result, looking for a recipe, looking for childcare, looking for a exercise regimen. We have all that. We do a great job with that, but just really trying to engage in sort of a personalized experience, that we can sustain over time. So that's really where our efforts are focused right now. Whether that takes the form of a subscription, a utility, meal planning tool, something like that. That's where we're focused right now.
Well, I sort of mentioned it earlier, and we're talking about that obviously with this panel, is just building not only the relationships but the data strategy. And so let me throw it back to you for this one. How are you sort of staying that first party focused? And you mentioned a little bit about where the search performance is. Are you able to infer anything from that in terms of what you need to do?
And that's back to me, Lisa?
Yes.
Just checking.
On the spot.
So yeah, we're obviously we're swimming in first party data, and it is, again, this really nice particular type of data, in that it's very intent focused. I think Neil spent a lot of time talking about that. We feel the same way, in that we really know what it is. It's a specific problem that somebody's trying to solve. Search is a little bit upstream. People are still kind of hunting around for a potential solution, but once they get into the actual utility content, the recipe, the childcare article, whatever it is, then we know really what they're up to. And so we can put to work a bunch of hyper-contextual strategies, which is really great just in terms of inferring that from the actual content itself, where they're coming. We have a lot of high quality user location data that is permission based, obviously, and because people do share their location with us, in order to see some of the unique ad products that we have on our pages, which is basically localized offers from retailers and things like that are location specific, particularly in our food properties. That gives us a ton of additional insight, great for CPG clients, for example, and that all flows back into the pool of first party that we have. When we take the hyper-contextual and we marry it up which is our current endeavor with the 1P data that we have in-house, we really think that we're going to be able to do some profound, hyper-personalization and move toward a state which we're starting to call self-driving commerce, if you will. So like a self-driving car, but anticipating, predicting what types of things the consumer would actually need in that context, sort of based on either their history or what we're able to infer from a contextual standpoint. So.
And Karthic, sort of going with that still in terms of, building that first party data, but also safety is a big concern as well. How are you also ensuring that?
I mean, that's foundational to everything we do, because like I said, if you have a brand that's been there for many decades, trust is the key element that drives the user engagement. And everything we do, we look at it from a trusted relationship perspective. So we make sure there's adequate transparency. Everybody knows what they're sharing, whether they have an option to opt in or opt out. The other thing I would say is around 3 or 4 years back, we launched a platform called Spire, which is a performance marketing platform that we built in-house internally using only first-party data. So we said, look, let's not get these aggregated outside data sets in. We'll just use our own data to figure that out. And that enables users to feel safe about their data not leaving our ecosystem into the wild west of ad tech, which at that point, you have no control over your data at that point. So that has enabled a lot of our infrastructure to be built around privacy, security, safety, trust. And I think the environment that we operate in kind of suits that futuristic thing. I wouldn't even say futuristic at this point, it's already here in terms of all the regulations that are talking about privacy, but we are much more tailored towards that ecosystem, just because we're not an ad tech company and we are a company that creates its own content. So right at the content creation mode, it's based on trust, and through the customer journey, at every touch point, you make sure that trust is key. In everything we build, not just in the user interface, the data behind the user interface and the technology, they all work in unison to make sure that that's maintained across the board.
Right. And with Cory, I want to touch on you. When we spoke before, you also said that you had a lot of acquisition gains during COVID. And really, what do you credit that to? And how will you then try to sustain that moving forward?
Thank you, Lisa. And, echoing all that Karthic and Corbin said, certainly, thinking about a lot of, very similar things. But as it relates to Vice Media Group and COVID in particular, and I've been with the company about a little over 2 years now. And during that time, one, really orienting to, more of a Gen Z, younger millennial audience and formats built for those audiences like I was talking about. And also at the same time, evolving, I don't want to say changing our strategy, but evolving our strategy, one that's just thinking about scale and also, encompassing engagement, scale and engagement. You want both of those things to be successful. And on the engagement front, major gains. So, with COVID, and I'm sure, at Meredith and Conde, you guys are seeing the same things. It's like we've seen traffic gains during COVID. People are looking for service content. They're trying to understand their world. They're trying to make sense of do this, don't do that. Sort of that servicey element has been key for us as well, particularly for these younger audiences that are trying to navigate. But not just thinking about how big can those audiences be, but are they coming back to us? What specifically are they coming back to? And really building strong, I would call it authority areas in places where we know we have trust and credibility, and continuing to just build those. And so really, mining that data around what I would say these loyalty cohorts are for us. And particularly, we found a lot of that on these off-platform, built for mobile experiences in increased interactions with likes, shares, even just kind of direct messaging links between our audiences. We want to be that content that you're sharing in your group chat. And I mean, if your experiences are like any of my experiences these days, that's those are your sort of trusted peer groups. And if that content is moving around in those environments, you start to see those kind of engagement metrics have real like network gains. And then doubling down on that as it happens. So very bullish on that in general. which sort of takes me to, direct to consumer, or what I like to call direct to community, because these, communities that we're building, that we're seeing these gains in, these engagement gains, that's where you really get signal as a publisher to say, hey, I have permission here to address this audience in a way that's meaningful. And particularly, this is why brands come to us, because they want to be a part of that engaged audience that, I don't want to fully say that we own, but that we're able to address in a way that's meaningful and they trust us. So we've actually just launched something called Waypoint Plus. Waypoint is our gaming vertical for the uninitiated, and it has a really, really strong fan base. The folks that come to our Waypoint vertical, and they do that, via Twitch stream, via Discord forum that's really, really happening, every day, all day long. The traditional articles, obviously, podcasts. There's sort of a menu of ways you can engage with that Waypoint community. But we just a couple of weeks ago, actually, created something called Waypoint Plus, $5 a month, and you get added, additional Twitch streams, additional, bonus content in a variety of ways. And the forum in particular is really what that audience is looking for. And that kind of direct to community, environment can really only be built and be successful once you know that you have those strong audiences. So mining that data off of that engagement strategy, and ultimately, all the way down the conversion funnel, which, then you can sort of talk about e-commerce in that environment as well. So yeah, we're seeing, we're optimistic, generally speaking.
Yeah, and well, even coming off of that, you both, Karthic and Corbin, you've mentioned product offerings as well, and that would be in a similar way. You're bringing in these people to engage in a particular thing, and then you keep them. Talk about that more specifically. Let's start with you, Karthic, first.
Sure. So yes, absolutely. Like we've talked about many times here, the engagement has increased. Now it's all about translating that engagement to a more consistent kind of user experience where they're in the platform. And I'll say is very similar things, creating a network effect. Obviously, Conde brands are right from luxury to health to current news. And of course, we have brands like Teen Vogue, which engage with much younger audiences. And then you have Wired, which is very tech focused. But there are a lot of dimensions to the consumer or a customer or a person who's engaging with content. How do you give them everything that they want to be able to create that network effect so they can actually get the information and be within an experience that really makes sense to them? And in terms of whatever that value exchange is, like we have things like, for example, in New Yorker, we have crosswords that people are very engaged with. So now how do you take that and make it a much more web-centric, easy to use, not just on a magazine when you print it out and do it? And how do you create experiences there? And then there's a community around that experience, which then can be extended. And as Cory was saying, looking at how they're coming in, whether they're coming from social media or any of those things, then creating that ecosystem where the network effect and the community effect kind of brings them into a place. And then the next step is obviously mining and personalizing that. And certainly there's going to be monetization around whether you sell them a subscription or e-commerce or even a crossword itself could be a paid experience. It's just a matter of finding what works for that group or that cohort or that segment and providing the tools. And again, the big thing that we've learned during the COVID thing, which I think it's important for me to mention, is as people are working remotely, the collaborative effect of technology enabling right from content creators to social media editors to folks who are in my team who are supplying this information to other people. They have information that's flowing in a very seamless kind of way, where the fact that everybody's remote, or at least has been remote for quite a prolonged period of time, that enables that cross-pollination of all these functions to work together to then look at a customer experience, which is much more unified in nature. So I would say that's been our focus, and that's where we've seen a lot of success.
Right. And I know, Corbin, you were saying the same thing in terms of, you talked about your utility.
Yeah, so I would just extend the digital products to the physical world. So a lot of the stuff that we're learning online from, the great first party data that we're collecting is actually extensible to physical product. And that's where sort of a portfolio of iconic, older, but very, very relevant brands like Better Homes and Gardens, $3 billion worth of licensed products sold plus in Walmarts across the country. But we're continuing to churn out. We actually set up a thing called the product studio within Meredith and a data studio within Meredith that kind of tackle both of those. So you can, going back to Neil's comment again, we love advertising revenue. We have a fantastic sales force, an incredible ad product stack and everything else. So buy all the digital advertising you like, but there are some natural extensions based on the information that we have that allow us to design super relevant products, like physical products that you can buy, eat, frozen meals from Eating Well, for example, monthly gardening planter subscription that we collaborated with Scott's Miracle Grow on. We've developed a line of cleaning products with Clorox that are going to hit the shelves here in the next month or so. Those kinds of things where we take that first party data and it gives us insight into the design of the product, but then also a pre-built marketing base for those products so that we can actually use the first party data to reach out to likely candidates for the product is actually a pretty cool flywheel loop that we can kind of bring to bear. So I think, subscription products and things like that, digital products, all fantastic. I know everybody on here is working hard on those, but, also the physical world is an interesting place to explore as well.
Well, I mean, and I do have one more question. I want to remind everyone, though, that if you have a question for these guys, just raise your hand. Steve will send you an unmute request because we want to hear from you. I'm sure they do too. And I don't want to speak for you. But I want to just follow up with that, Corbin, in terms of you're talking about, we are going back out to the physical. And, we mentioned it even in our call, how, yes, you guys have had a lot of success. Everyone's been stuck at home. But how are we moving forward? And I know you're a little bit more cautious about it, but what are you excited about too? So I guess give us both sides of that.
So as a relative newcomer to the publishing world, I have realized very quickly that you don't get to rest on your laurels in the media business. So it's a very, and I think we all learned this last year, that externalities kind of come out of nowhere and can kind of change things. And I think the next one really is people looking up from their devices again. And we're potentially seeing some signs. I saw a stat a couple of weeks ago that traffic to the web builder sites, the sort of the GoDaddies and things like that, where people were sort of hunkered down developing new digital content and things like that, was starting to taper off a little bit as kind of a canary in the coal mine there. So again, we're just trying to make sure that we remain super relevant. And I think, collectively, all of the parties of this panel are well positioned for that, by the way. But just remaining relevant and then maybe changing the dynamic of those relationships to make sure that they're more episodic and utility focused. And I keep bringing up retailers. It's like I'm obsessed with them, but they have really done a good job with loyalty programs of getting people to come back again and again and again and to do something. And so we're looking to start leverage the resources that we have to come up with those kind of sticky experiences. Karthic mentioned crosswords and Cory's got gaming. We have the same kind of focus on kind of food, parenting and things like that. And we're interested. We're excited to roll some new stuff out.
Well, I loved the comment that you had said about Netflix. What was it?
Yeah, so I heard this one a couple of weeks ago. Somebody, I was actually on an airplane, which was weird, and having one of my first airplane conversations, but a person leaned over and basically said, "Oh, I've finished Netflix." And I said, "Oh, what did you finish?" Like thinking it was Schitt's Creek or something like that. And it was like, "No, I finished all of Netflix." And so I think people have kind of, they've gone hard on a lot of media types. And so again, having something that's fresh and relevant is increasingly important.
Right. And now, Karthic, you the same thing. What have you learned this past year that you're really excited about and that you feel like it's working and you really want to continue doing that? What's that key learning point?
Yeah, I think I'll agree to a lot of what Corbin said, but I'll just talk about the opposite effect too, where physical world is also moving a lot faster into the digital world. Like all of the brands are creating content and creating media solutions and things like that, which has accelerated quite a bit in the last year. Because when people were stuck at home, the physical stores, whether it's the retailers or other entities, needed a digital presence, and they've invested quite a bit into that part of their ecosystem, whether it's content building or distribution or any of those things. And companies like Conde, Nast, which have been doing this for over a century, we have a certain amount of knowledge and expertise, which is very relevant to these brands. And I feel that relevance, if we can figure out a way of unlocking what we've learned, providing them the tools to be kind of using our experience to build better solutions, I think is super exciting for me, which again will hopefully lead, in my mind, to better consumer experiences and all of the, the the crazy ad, that the shoe ad that follows you forever, that kind of experience will go away, and people will actually build solutions that consumers actually want. And that, I think, is a great way to collaborate between us and our partners, whether it's advertising or any other type of partner, and come up with a better solution. So this is what I think I'm super excited about, because I think the whole experience that we've been through has accelerated this to a level where it makes a lot of sense that we talk a different language now.
Right. And Cory, you as well. I mean, and you're on the different end, a younger company as compared to these guys. So, and different younger audience, much more focused audience. So what are you learning? And really the digital world is your world, but in terms of your audience. So how are you expanding on that?
Sure. One thing that comes to mind that I'm just really very excited about, thinking about data, thinking about these community experiences that I've been talking about, is our e-commerce capability. We've seen great gains there with the acquisition of Refinery 29 into Vice Media Group, which we did an integration during COVID, which was an experience in and of itself. And the short of it is it's actually been really, really meaningful. Refinery 29 had a very strong e-commerce base, affiliate in particular, and you can think about sort of from a lifestyle perspective, the opportunities there within beauty, fashion, all of those sort of categories. And for Vice, hadn't quite gotten into that capability or that marketing to our audiences. And it's, of course, when you're doing anything like that, fundamentally you have to have a certain trust built in, and you have to have an audience that believes in your content, is coming back to your content. Again, that sort of that turn to engagement versus just sheer scale, though you want as much volume as you can because you want to pull people through that funnel. But we've really spent call it the last 9 months, so the second half of last year during COVID, and then now the beginnings of this year, which I can't believe it, we're already we're finishing up Q2. We launched a shopping vertical within Vice. It's called Rec Room. It's very fun. Has a sort of 70s, cool basement groovy vibe to it. It's very Vice. I really encourage you to check it out. And beyond our expectations, we've actually already hit our goals for the year, sort of amazingly within like by end of Q1. And to be fair, we set the goals at a level where we felt like it would be realistic for that audience, as it was not something we'd done before. So we did some experimentation during COVID and started to see, okay, these audiences are trusting us, they're interested in these products, and in products where we have strong authority, of course. And then launching that in the beginning of the year has just really taken off. And so I'm very excited to see that grow. I'm very excited to see that capability extended into not just written text formats, but we've also been doing a lot of experimentation within the stories environment too. Instagram in particular, Shopping Wednesdays is a thing. Get all your shopping, Munchies, our food vertical, seen a lot of fun there, particularly within the stories environment too. So that's one we're betting on, bullish on. And it's a service to an audience. Again, if you build that, you mine that data, you understand how they're coming to you, why they're coming to you, how much they're coming back. You can build an efficient funnel for that. So good stuff there.
Awesome. So let's bring in Steve, see if you have any questions.
Hey guys, one question directed at Corbin. What is a data studio? What does it actually do? What does it actually do, and why do you call it a studio?
Well, it's a little room here in our building down by on top of Brookfield Place, across from World Trade. No, it's actually a coalition of people who are kind of focused on data within the company, and then we're making it accessible to our customers. Typically, this would be client direct kind of stuff to solve problems. So, if they have a question about a new product line, if they have a question about what potential audience extensions might be profitable for them, which types of retailers they might want to look at. And help them sort of, do a little deeper dive than they might be able to do through simple surveys and things like that. We can bring a lot of, obviously this trove of data and put it to work for them directly. So you can actually approach us and transact with us directly on a data conversation in addition to a media and product development.
And that sort of segues into my next question, which has to do with the relationship between you guys and the platforms in terms of data. As you're going to market with your data capabilities, with your knowledge and profiles of consumers, what do you know that the platforms don't? What can you bring to advertisers that the platforms aren't already giving them?
Peace of mind.
All right, beyond that.
Yeah, so but you know, it sounds jokey, but it's actually quite true, which is that, you know, we are a, you know, first party permission based audience destination. We're not you know, tracking you behind your back. We're not reading your emails. We're not secretly observing your location. Anything that we have is shared with us, you know, sort of explicitly, and we have all the opt-outs in place for that. But really, I think, you know, our content environment is super clean. We have nothing that's controversial on the site other than perhaps the fight brewing between Kanye and Bradley Cooper. But there is, you know, it's really just that wholesomeness, peace of mind that advertisers can come to us and say, hey, you know, this is information that we couldn't literally get elsewhere. This engagement below the search level. Again, when I'm not looking at a page's search results, obviously Google gets some intent from that. Facebook gets some intent from algorithmic scrolling and clicking through on various articles. We have answers to people's immediate questions, and Neil talked about this a bit as well. But when somebody asks a question about how to calm a colicky baby, we know what's going on in the moment. We know how many times you've done that. Did you actually follow through with our pregnancy tracker prior to engaging with that content? Then we start to be able to extrapolate and do some interesting things with that, which are not only good for advertisers, but also, you know, can be baked back into consumer experiences, which are actually personalization for the greater good of the experience.
I'd like to hear Karthic and Cory both answer that question. How you come answer the advertiser question? What do you have that the platforms aren't already giving me?
So apart from what Corbin said, which is of course the brand safety element of everything we do here in the, you know, big publishing houses or media houses, I think the other important thing that we know is I look at it this way, right? We are influencing to some extent search, and I'll give you an example, right? There was a time when I had a whole data science team solving a problem on the top places, destinations to go to, let's say in 2022 as the travel industry opens up. I can have all of my social listening and everything happening to come up with those 10 destinations, or I can just talk to the editor of Conde Nast Traveler and find out what they're going to put out there 3 months from now that'll influence those destinations. So that's the power of these brands that we need to figure out and leverage, of course, and this is what I was talking about a moment earlier about how do we take all of this intelligence and provide it to these brands, whether it's a cruise line or whoever, to be able to better leverage this information in whatever their end marketing goal is. And that's where I think we come into play. So I would look at it, we are influencers. There are obviously a lot of individual influencers in the world today. In fact, the first time I just realized a few days back that I'm following players and not teams as much as I used to in the past. So athletes have become influencers. So there are a lot of ways to influence the events of what's happening, but we have a role there. And that role is pretty significant and powerful. And I think that you probably will never get from a platform because nobody knows what's going to happen on a cover of a magazine 3 months from now, except for a very select few people.
You're on mute.
Or you're muted.
Hi. I hope I'm off mute now. Yes.
Yeah.
Well said, both Corbin and Karthic, and I would echo that. And Stephen, I appreciate the question. You know, for all of the reasons that they both just sort of articulated. But I would just sort of, you know, take it a step further to say, the platforms, okay, but we ourselves are also platforms. You know, we're sort of the original platforms, and you can think about a platform in terms of, you know, something like a a tech platform, a social media platform, but we're platforms of influence. We're what we'd like to say at Vice Media Group. We're the predictive platform for culture. To your very good point, Karthic, about no one knows what will be on the cover except a very select group of people, right? Those are the insights that brands want. Those are that's what drives culture forward. That is powerful in and of itself. And I think the pendulum in a lot of ways is swinging back to publisher platforms. It's that trust, it's that integrity, it's that direct relationship with those audiences. And sure, we acquire audiences or we distribute to audiences on all of these distributed platforms, which I've been a cheerleader for my entire publishing career, because you have to go where audiences are, but you have to be smart about your business. You can't just build your business on top of their businesses. It has to be a strategic, there has to be intention in how you do that. It can be a funnel, or it can be, marketing, or it can be a way for audiences to engage there. But ultimately, that's your brand, that's your IP moving around. That is your platform, and that's what people trust. And and Karthic, to your interesting point about, and I often say this: people follow people, they don't follow brands. So the talent that we have within our proverbial walls, the authority areas we have, the subject matter expertise we have, that is our platform. And that's why audiences are coming to us. That platforms do not have that. We do. And they're relying on us to sort of move that IP around and to gain audiences to have engagement on their own platforms off of ours. So, I just want to say it's a symbiotic relationship. And if you sort of think about it the right way and you architect it the right way, it can be a beautiful one. If not, it can be a dangerous one, right? But there's real power in that. But I think, for platforms to just lean into that power and that influence that we actually have with our audiences, it's a really sort of interesting dynamic that's shaking and shaping, and we should not be beholden to them. And the changes that they make on the algorithm, shouldn't scare us or dramatically change our business. We should continue to pivot around where we can find audiences. But ultimately, we are a platform in and of ourselves, and sort of owning that and leaning into that, if that makes sense.
Well, thank you, guys.
Yeah.
I think next year I want to hear more of an answer that focuses on what data we have that the others don't. But but I'm going to leave it at that tease. I thank you guys very much for sharing your data strategies.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. This is a great panel. Really appreciate you guys being
Thanks.
here.